First things first, Bwana Ramogi, we know that senior Kenya Power managers are currently before the courts, and we don't want to get into the nitty-gritties of what has taken them there because the court will ultimately decide. But if even half of the allegations taken by the DPP to court are true, what does this tell us about the state of Kenya's power, which is very important as the president looks to achieve his Big Four agenda?
Well, thank you. Let me start by saying that Kenya is one of the, Kenyan electricity is one of the most expensive in the continent, trailing behind countries like Liberia, Sierra Leone, and mostly the desert countries or the countries that actually import diesel all the way from the Middle East to West Africa. And so it is more expensive to them.
But let me get that right. Trailing behind Liberia.
Yes, in terms of
costs.
Yes.
Sierra Leone.
Yes.
These are countries that have undergone serious conflicts.
Correct. So we are in that cluster.
My goodness. Okay.
But that is not just the whole bad news. There's more bad news to it. The problem of cost of electricity in Kenya is caused by four things: the billing, the procurement, the IPPs or the independent power producers that make power very expensive, and these guys drive their electricity production by diesel, and finally the big projects that are there but are not yielding the results that are required. I'll start with the billing because it's the easiest one. The gentlemen who are in court are in fact in court because of procurement, and so the three other items are not even covered in that suit, and procurement is actually the least of the three problems. And so the court case is just a PR exercise that is not going to help in any way.
That is okay, so justice should be done, but you're saying it won't help in bringing down the cost.
No, it will not.
Power.
No, it will not. It's just a whitewash experience. The real case that will bring change to the costs of power in Kenya is the Apollo Mboya case, because it deals with the issues of billing, number one. It addresses the real issues of billing, and number two, it addresses the structural institutions that have been established to make the Kenyan people pay for chosen few individuals, because the real people who are eating out of the power basket is not the guys in court, it's some masked guys behind the scenes. Now let me start with the billing. Ordinarily, you look at the billing from the revenues of the company and what they were able to sell. According to their reports last year, Kenya Power did revenues of around 121 billion. That puts them in the class of the likes of, Kenya Airways, the likes of Safaricom. In essence, big players. Yeah, big players. But they were only able to do 7.7 billion kilowatts per hour. So if you divide the two, you find that we are charged about 15 shillings per kilowatt hour. And as I said, that is very expensive compared to South Africa, which is about 9 shillings per kilowatt hour. Now the other problem of billing is that they had a system that was working well from 1998, and then come December they decide to get rid of the system, claiming that it can no longer carry new connectors into the loop. But the new system is what now triggered the Apollo Mboya case, because it sent bills to people like Wahiga Moura, 50,000 for 1 month, an individual consumer. And so it was unfair, it was uncouth, it was immoral. But at the same time, the system that they placed to buy tokens with, if you remember that story, somehow made sure that some money went into some individuals' pockets. Because
there were several numbers that you could, I guess, send your money to if you want to buy a token, and questions were raised by the public. Why am I sending either that number or this number? Why can't it just be one number? Yeah, so it's so the billing problem, there are obviously structural problems around it in terms of that. The token buying, in terms of the actual billing system, in terms of the calculations, because for instance we could be neighbors and we can decide let's buy the tokens together at the same time, and and use maybe 1,000 shillings, and I get double what you get. And so it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And so but the second problem, which is now procurement,
is the reason why these guys are in court. And so you find that the ODPP's case does not have anything on billing, which is actually the main interest of the public.
Maybe he's preparing it behind the scenes.
Maybe it's not good enough in law.
There are many who have applauded this move as the first step, but I get, okay, so you're saying procurement alone, if you are to sort of sort the power sector, isn't the biggest issue.
Absolutely.
But if there's any crimes, I mean, I think let the DPP carry on, and the courts will determine how things move forward. One of the biggest calls this year, Bwana Ramogi, has been to remove the monopoly that is Kenya Power, to devolve power to the counties. Talk to me about your thoughts when that discussion comes up. Do you see it as the savior that will sort Kenya, or does it then put us in a very complicated place?
No. Actually, that's part of the Apollo Mboya case, to devolve power to the counties, or electricity management to the counties, which is a very good thing, because then it will dismantle the institutions of corruption that have established themselves for the last 100 years or so that Kenya Power has been in place. When you have so many players or too many players, there is indeed a danger that we might devolve corruption to the county level, but that danger is minimal compared to the danger of having one mammoth entity, yes, corruption entity, which is in fact a monopoly. But the other beauty of it is it will open up the space for other new players, because one of the things that institutionalized corruption does is it ensures that there are barriers for entry, so that no one else can come in and get a piece of the pie. And so I am in support of dismantling the monopoly. It is unfair. It is uncouth. If you look at some of the problems we are having today, is because of the alliance of Kenya Power, KETRACO, and Energy Regulatory Commission. And so that the three can just, and probably
can make some sort of decision.
Yes, at a golf course, the three managers can just decide, let's do this, and that's it. As opposed to if you had 47 other players, as opposed to if you had perhaps another 50 players. That then changes the dynamics significantly.
Okay. Does choice means variety, but does it also translate to quality? Will you say that if we then devolve power, every Kenyan in every county then has a chance to get better quality power, higher quality one that doesn't have, so hopefully less of brownouts, blackouts, a power that can be depended on, relied upon as well?
You see, quality now would also be informed by procurement.
We're back here again.
We are back here again, because if you're procuring substandard transformers, if you're procuring equipment that cannot work, then obviously you're back to brownouts, blackouts at whatever level, whether it's at the national level or the county level. But then there's the other animal called the IPPs, the independent power producers. These guys produce a lot of power on diesel. And we have gone into contracts with them for some even up to 23 years. And so what is happening today, Wahiga, is that we have excess power. We are producing excess power, and a lot of power goes unused because we are producing 2,300 kilowatts, and we are using only 1,600. So about 1,800. About 500 goes unused. And still, this is very expensive. And so the reason why this is happening is because of the independent power producers, guys who use diesel, and they are preferred above the Kenyan production, wind production, or hydroelectricity. And so as long as this is the status quo, things will not change. But if we somehow devolve, we will break that structure.
Last year, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and of course we will want to delve into the big four, while I think giving a speech during Shtabin Jamhuri Day, ordered or gave some sort of incentive to corporates that at some point you should be able to get power at 50% off. And if you look at a copy, coincidentally, a copy of the Daily Nation this morning, they have quotes of managers and corporates who are complaining about the cost of power, despite a directive like that one. Let's talk about the complexity of powering corporates, and that, we are told, is the reason why some corporates come to the country, set up and say this is too much, and walk away.
And that is true because power production, or let's just say energy. Is a big input in production, especially in manufacturing production. And if you're competing with the likes of Ethiopia, if you're competing with the likes of Egypt for the same investor, if you're competing with Tanzania, then it becomes unsustainable for an investor to bring money, pack it in Kenya, and then pay exorbitant rates for power. But what the president said is, you know, the president directs one thing and never goes into how it's implemented. The implementation came that manufacturers were given 50% off at night. At night. So assuming that your costs were 100%, if we reduce 50%, that means only 25% has gone off. But by the time the 25% has gone off, remember, by December last year, someone somewhere had sat and probably doubled your power costs. So in essence, they have not they have not done anything to your bottom line, and this is why manufacturers are complaining, because it has not made any economic sense to me. What sort of radical proposals would you have to us, in a sense, increase sort of what we can do in terms of power? Because we see, I think it was Ethiopia the other day, they launched, or they have a project, some dam project that's supposed to be really big and take Ethiopia to the next level. We have dam projects in this country, some of which have stalled along the way as well. Moving forward, if you're talking about a 5 or a 10-year plan to make Kenya a hub for consistent, affordable power supply for corporates, what sort of recommendations would you give? Well, the first thing is we need to get out of these contracts. The big independent first, even with the big projects that we have, because we have some big projects signed with some Greek companies, I think with Gulf Energy as well, and the country is already investing 100 billion per annum into these projects, and they don't make sense because we already have excess power. Why are we investing 100 billion, which is needed elsewhere, into this power production? Because we want to stretch our capacity to 5,000, and it really does not make sense. So the first thing is to get out of these contracts. The second thing is to get out of the contracts with IPPs and tell them, look here, this is not sustainable. It does not make sense why we should depend on diesel power while we have electricity and we have wind power. But also on the legal side, I think we need to hold the minister accountable. Yes, this charade of putting small managers at the forefront and then he is pretending to be the whistleblower doesn't make sense. Even if it's a matter of 2022, he believes he is the whistleblower. No, he is not the whistleblower. He's playing his part. Okay, but anyway, we are not a court of law, a court, so we will not get into that as well. But I think your point has come out quite clearly. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the value-added tax on petroleum products? We're talking about petrol, diesel, kerosene, natural gas. There was an exemption, should be coming to an end, I believe, in the next 2 months. What are your thoughts on this? And of course, its direct impact on the cost of living for the ordinary Kenyan. Well, obviously, you see, the beauty of economics is a social science. Everybody is feeling it. You don't even need to translate it. Because everybody knows that the cost of fuel is high. And they are feeling it, irrespective of their status in life or class. And VAT never makes a lot of sense, especially to me, because we hike VAT, and then when you look at the value add to the general revenue of the country, it makes absolutely no sense. And so I do not support the idea of taxing VAT on petroleum. But on the other hand, you should also recognize that the government is broke. They have used a lot of money on infrastructure, brick and mortar projects. They hardly have any money for the human end of things or the social end of things. And so they are stretching their hand anywhere they can find money. And the easy kill is usually petroleum, because they believe that the cartel will shoulder the burden, which never happens because they just push it to you. Now they are going to mobile telephony, and of course they are asking you to rat on your landlord and tell them who your landlord is. I think no one will have a problem doing that. That is an easy one. A survey also, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics say 10%, the cost of living has gone up by 10% or so. Those numbers make sense to you? Yes, they do. Last year, we did not do so well in economic terms. The constant droughts that have been there have also eaten into our food security. At the same time, there are companies that are leaving the country. Unemployment is going up. In essence, then, if there were more resources coming to a business owner, they are no longer coming. So he needs to adjust his price to survive. And so yes, the cost of living has gone significantly high. And this will not change unless we make some drastic changes to, number one, the food security. Really, the big four is a winner. If the president can actually be serious about it and actually spend time with some of his managers and just follow
What does being serious about it means? There are those who would say he's very serious about it.
I hesitate to go into
okay, you were saying if you were to spend time with his, what does that mean, spend time with his managers?
Well, because he gives directives and then the implementation is not exactly as as beautiful.
Nobody knows if there's even a follow-up.
Yeah, it's not as flowery as the way he put it. Because if you look at, for example, power, how power is implemented. When he launched Olkaria in 2015, he was like, the cost of power is going to go down because now we have renewable energy and we are investing some more in wind energy up north in Loyangalani, which has refused to end because it is in the interest of the powers that project not be completed so that IPPs can get money.
That is your opinion?
It is my humble opinion.
Okay, go ahead.
But the president needs to follow through and say, actually, fine, we said this should be done. What is actually happening? I'm wondering, does he realize that we are paying more power, more money for power after he has launched Olkaria? It really...
There's a disconnect.
There is a major disconnect on what he says and what is implemented.
Okay. And so if he sorts that, if he in a sense follows through with the implementers of the projects, whether it's agriculture, whether it's healthcare, for example, whether it's power, and you've said that very correctly, then the big four could go from becoming a discussion to a reality?
Yes, and they could actually fix the problems that we have. Because some of the major problems, basic economic problems of unemployment or lack of housing or lack of food security, if you sorted that out, really, we would not even mind knowing who the president is in 2022 or 2020, whatever. We just want our issues sorted and we'll be okay.
Is there any good news from an economic perspective for any Kenyan watching?
There's always good news.
There's always good news. That's positive to hear.
Because the spirit of the Kenyan people is very strong. And I am humbled to say that we have not gone to the extremes of, even if a very large majority of Kenyans are living in abject poverty, perhaps of extreme crime or just, dismantling the establishment of capitalism, as it were. And so there is good news in terms of the spirit of the country, in terms of our productivity, in terms of our diligence, in terms of our hard work. If you look at some of the things that are happening on the ground, I believe that if the country focuses on the infrastructure, or so to speak, the soft items of our component will be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm told we have some messages. Are we able to display them? Of course, he's an economist. He doesn't represent the power sector, so some of them he may not be able to answer. But let's look at some of them. Okay, Gidhua Koine from Bahati says, we are going to benefit when it comes to electricity when private suppliers are given the mandate to compete with Kenya Power. Ramogi, can you note that? Philip Denesi from Wingi says, I don't get it. In one day, I buy 2 tokens of the same amount of 1,000 shillings, and I get 2 different tokens. 1, 62 units, 2, 43 units, surely. Someone, you don't give us your name, but to say, ask him why the Energy Regulatory Commission destroyed a power plant in Remba Island. Okay, those are the 3. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to answer the 3rd one, but maybe the 1st and 2nd you can comment on.
Yes, let me start with the billing. I am also concerned because when I buy tokens...
This is something you've experienced yourself?
Absolutely. I am a consumer, so naturally I buy tokens and then the results differ significantly. So at some point, I just said I am a strong supporter of the Apollo Mboya case. I am looking forward to a ruling that favors me, naturally. But it is an ugly sight that an institution entrusted with the well-being of Kenyans as regards electricity consumption can go as low as this.
Cannot answer questions asked by Kenyans.
Absolutely.
A very simple question. How come the same amount of money you give me this?
Yes.
And then an hour later, you give me that.
Yeah.
Someone asked about private players competing against Kenya Power.
Yeah, that is what we are looking for in terms of private players. But you see, the national, sorry, and this is why devolution will help, establishing a grid nationally that can compete with Kenya Power and distribute power effectively to all consumers is a huge endeavor, as opposed to establishing a grid within a county. And so this is why, or perhaps a consortium of counties, and this is why devolving power production, distribution, etc., makes a lot of sense, because then it will open up the space to other players who might not have the capital outlay that Kenya Power has, but can do, let's say, Mombasa, Kilifi, Kwale, something like that, effectively. And we are looking forward to that, because then the arrogance of Kenya Power, the institutions of corruption, will be dismantled significantly.
The allegations of institutions of corruption.
Hopefully.
Thank you so much. Odhiambo, still, no one has been charged. I mean, they've been taken to court, but no one has been convicted. So we hold on that particular matter. That's Odhiambo Ramogi. He's not afraid to speak his mind. He's an economist here to help us understand a bit more about Kenya's current power situation.